There's something seriously wrong with my neighbor. I don't have much time to explain, so I'll try to give as much detail as I can. I live in a small neighborhood, located on the outskirts of Arizona, and I barely interact with others. Some people see me as being antisocial, and have tried to get me out and experience more of what life has to offer. It was all annoying, and very stressful at times, but after a while I guess you can say I opened up more. I began to communicate more with others and eventually found myself being invited out to parties and other local events. Fast forward a few months. It is now December, and the holidays is now upon us. And this year I felt like doing something different. Instead of sitting at home and treating these upcoming days like any other, I decided to invite some people over to spend time with me for the holiday. Though it was out of my comfort zone, I felt good about my decision. Only problem was I didn't know much about my neighbors. Sure, I talked and went out with them from time to time, but I don't remember any of them talking about their personal life. So when I called up some friends from the neighborhood, they all had something to do with their families or already had other plans scheduled. This sort of bummed me out, but I didn't let it affect me too much. Later that day, it was about 5:30 p.m., and the sun was just beginning to set. I was sitting on my couch watching the fire as I sipped my freshly brewed tea. As I sat there, I noticed it was quite lonely, so I decided to play some music on my phone in an attempt to get into the holiday spirit. After a few minutes of tapping my foot and bopping my head to the songs, the sound of a loud, aggressive knock came from my front door. My body froze. However, it wasn't from fear. We didn't get any suspicious happenings around here, so this hardly gave me a scare. I turned down the music and approached the door. "Who is it?" I questioned as I grabbed the handle. There was no response, and I know I should have just asked or simply not opened the door at all, but unfortunately, I wasn't thinking, and opened it anyways. Standing in front of the doorway was an awfully tall man. He had to be about 6'2" at least. I myself am 5'10", so maybe it was just my height. His hair was a mess, and his clothing seemed worn down. Hello? Can I help you with something?" The man didn't respond. He just stood there, swaying slightly back and forth. I swear it felt like I was standing in that doorway for hours. He took one last sway before finally stopping in a weird, awkwardly way. The way he stopped was quite unnatural and a little impressive, so to say. To give you an example, think of the dance move Michael Jackson does when he stands on his toes. Only difference is that he was still flat on his feet, with his legs stretched out and his face just inches away from mine. I pulled my head back and put a hand on his shoulder. "Listen, if you don't need anything, then I advise you to move on." I gave him a slight push on his shoulder when doing this. The man's head quickly twitched towards my hand. He then leaned back into a normal, upright stance. Again, complete silence. After a few seconds, maybe 10 or so, the man pulled back his hair to reveal his eyes, giving me a clear view of his entire face. The man was well shaved and had a huge grin. His eyes were severely widened and he slowly opened his mouth as if he was going to speak. I burst out in a stern voice. "All right, I think it's time for you to get off my—" "Oh, my apologies. I was just strolling around the neighborhood and realized you were the only one home. No family to go to?" I squinted at the man before responding. "No, just me. Though if that's all you have to ask, then I suggest you be on your way." The man looked above my head into the house, surveying the inside before turning to look down the street. "You see that house down there, right behind the other two? That's where I stay. I hardly take walks like this for the others, never seem willing to speak to me. Except, well, you of course." At this point, I didn't know what to say. All I really could do was stand there in confusion. "Oh, I guess I haven't properly introduced myself then. My name is—" "Just get the hell off my property." The man stared. "Hmm?" I don't know what began to set me off so much, but I was fed up and wanted him to leave. "You heard me. Get the hell out of here." The man's grin disappeared and instead was replaced by a deep frown, clearly filled with irritation. "Very well then." He turned around and walked off down the street, towards the direction of his home. I closed my door and sat back down. Too frustrated to continue playing music, I sighed as I rubbed my eyes. It was about 2 hours later, and it was now completely dark outside. I must have dozed off, because I remember quickly opening my eyes sitting up to see that the fire was out and the house was completely dark. I reached over to turn on the lamp beside my couch, and as soon as the light switched on, it switched right back off. Huh? I tried turning it back on countless of times before getting up and trying other switches. None of the lights were turning on, and I assumed the power was out. I put on my shoes and coat and went out the back door to check the fuse box. Normally in some places, the box will be in the basement, but for mine, it sat right behind my house, attached to the wall. I opened the panel and squinted as I flicked multiple switches back and forth. As I was doing this, I felt the feeling of being watched. I stopped what I was doing and turned around to see the man standing about a couple yards away. Now there was a set of woods behind my house, and they aren't that deep, but it takes about 10 minutes to travel through. The man stood there right in front of them, back facing towards me. After analyzing and making sure it was him and not some random, I shook my head and turned back to the fuse. Weirdo. After flicking one of the switches, a giant spark burst out from the box. Shit, I muttered, covering my face from the sparks. I turned to observe my surroundings, refusing to face the box out of frustration. Then when I locked eyes with him, the man was now facing in my direction. Same frown as before, after telling him to leave. This creeped me out a bit, but I still didn't let it get to me. Still here, huh? No response. Instead, his frown turned into a wide, inhuman, ear-to-ear smile, and his eyes widened even more than before. What the hell? The man darted in my direction, his body slightly hunched forward, and his arms spread out as if he was ready to embrace me in a big bear hug. His fingers were bent, and I could see a few veins formed in the skin on his forehead. The speed he was running at wasn't normal. It wasn't even something you'd see from an Olympic runner. It was more of a superhuman type of speed. After a few seconds, I finally gained control to move and haul ass back inside. I slammed the door shut and locked it immediately. What the hell was that? I stepped away from the door, backing up into my living room. I don't think I took eyes off the door for even a second. Let me in. The man's voice came from the window by the front door. His voice was deep, raspy, and made my blood curdle. I was afraid to turn around. I imagined seeing his face pressed up against the window, same inhuman-like smile and wide eyes. But when I turned, he wasn't there. Let me in. Again, I heard his voice. This time it came from the window by the back door. This continued on for more than 15 seconds before I yelled out, "What the hell do you want from me?" I stormed towards the door and swung it open, ready to attack whatever was behind it. Immediately, an aggressive breeze passed by me and came into my house. I looked around and the man was nowhere to be found. I closed the door and stomped over to the back and opened it with the same movement as before. Nothing. After closing the door, I walked back into the living room, grabbed my phone, and did what I should have done at the very beginning. Dial 911. It took a few rings for them to finally pick up. When they did, I didn't give them any time to speak. Hello? There's a crazed man outside, and I need you guys to send somebody out, quick. Silence. For about a second, it felt like nobody was on the other end. That's when I heard his breathing. I'm inside your house. The phone fell out of my hand as I felt the strong, sinister presence behind me. I hurried and ran upstairs to my room. I grabbed my laptop and sat on my dresser and slammed the door, jumping into the closet behind a set of clothes. It's been about 45 minutes, and I can still hear him, moving around, whispering, calling out to me with laughter. He's getting closer and it won't be long before he finds me. Calling the police didn't work, so I'm hoping this message will. I can hear his footsteps getting louder, heavier, and his voice turning into a more demonic tone. At this point it sounds like he's crawling on the walls. Or is it the ceiling? He's right outside my door now. He's muttering something. From what I hear, it sounds like a chant. Please, if anyone finds this, send help. I don't think I have much time left. God help me. That concludes the story. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more videos. That's it. Take care.